So in this video, I would like to explain how to conjugate verbs in the present tense in Russian. Verb conjugation in Russian indicates a change to the form of a verb so that it fits the pronoun that you write the verb into. In this video, I'll just cover how verb conjugation works in the present tense. In Russian, there's only one sense of time in the present, meaning that unlike in English, where we have other forms of the present, these do not exist in Russian. Still, there are irregular verbs both in English and Russian, but it's a concept for a future video. For now, I'm simply focusing on regular verbs. Before understanding how to conjugate verbs in Russian, we have to know how to identify verbs. In English, we identify a verb because it starts with the preposition to work, to speak, to walk, to look, and so on. To identify a verb in Russian, the ending of the verb, also known as the infinitive, will be t, typically having a vowel before, such as at and it. Within the verbs that end in t, there are two further distinctions. Verbs that end in at follow the first conjugation pattern, while verbs that end in it follow the second conjugation pattern, ultimately making Russian have only two conjugation patterns. Almost all verbs in Russian end in t, so identifying a verb is not that hard, but it's the vowel before t that you have to know in order to conjugate the verb correctly. Sometimes you will see verbs having a different vowel before t that will still follow one of the already existing patterns. Because there are so many vowel endings for verbs, it would be impossible to understand and cover every type of verb, so in this video, I'm simply giving the general idea of verb conjugation, coming from the most common endings. Irregular verbs will be explained in the next videos. First, I would like to explain how verb conjugation works in English so that it's comparable to Russian. In English, we have the pronouns I, you, he. We can also say she or it, but I'm putting he to leave some space, considering that the conjugation is still the same for she and it. Then, there's we, y'all, and they. English formally doesn't have y'all, but I'm still including it because Russian has it. The way that verb conjugation works in English is by keeping the same form as the infinitive, but only adding an s in the he pronoun. Take the verb to work as an example. The conjugations are I work, you work, he works, we work, y'all work, and they work. This is why English is very simple. Now, let's take a look at this concept in Russian. Here we have the Russian pronouns that act as verb conjugation subjects. Я, ты, он, мы, вы, and они. We can include она and оно, but I'm simply putting on to leave some space, considering that она and оно will have the same conjugation. The first conjugation in Russian has to do with verbs that end in t, specifically with the ending at. The way that the first conjugation works in Russian is by dropping the last two letters of the infinitive, normally it's t, and then adding the corresponding ending that fits the pronoun. Unlike the two conjugations that there are in English, Russian has 6. To conjugate simple verbs ending in at, you drop the ending of the infinitive and then add the ending that corresponds to the pronoun. For ya, we put you. For ты, we put ешь. For он or она, оно, we put ет. For мы, we put ем. For вы, we put ете. And for они, we put ют. Let's use the verb работать, which means to work. How would this verb be conjugated in the present tense in Russian? We take the infinitive работать, drop the last two letters, and then add the grammatical endings that correspond to the pronouns. For я, we drop the ending and add you. So we get я работаю. I work. The more you try this concept, the faster you'll get it. For ты, we get ты работаешь. You work. For он or она, оно, we get он работает. For мы, we get мы работаем. For вы, we get вы работаете. For они, we get они работают. This is the first conjugation pattern for simple verbs in Russian that end in at. And because each pronoun follows a different conjugation, we can tell who the subject is without the pronouns themselves. Работаю means I work. Работаешь means you work. Работает means he, she, or it works, and so on. This concept cannot be in English because the grammar is the same for 80% of the pronouns. Therefore, we need the pronoun to understand who the subject is. As I said previously, there could be different verbs with different vowel endings in t, which may follow this pattern. Also, there will not be too many examples in this video because by learning how to conjugate verbs in Russian, you might need to build on more grammar in order to make phrases and sentences. When you learn from the beginning, you can try making statements on your own, but I would advise to get a better feel on how to speak Russian, if that's your goal. The way that the second verb conjugation works in Russian is by dropping the last 2 or 3 letters from the infinitive, depending on the letters, and then adding the corresponding ending that fits the pronoun. To conjugate simple verbs ending in it, you drop the ending from the infinitive and then add the corresponding ending. For ya, we put you or u, depending on the consonants to preserve a uniform sound. For ty, we put ish. For on or ano, we put it. For my, we put im. For vy, we put ite. For ani, we put yat or at, again depending on the consonants. However, there's a very vital concept that you have to know about the second conjugation in Russian. The second conjugation pattern is affected by spelling rules when it comes down to specific consonants and vowels. The first person singular, which is ya, is affected by the rule of stressed consonants. When using the second conjugation, sometimes the last letter of the stem, in infinitive without it, for the pronoun ya, changes in order to keep a perfect sound when the word is said. This rule only applies to ya, and it has a small pattern that you can follow. If the last letter of the stem is de, it becomes je. If it's ze, it becomes je. Se becomes she, ste becomes she, te becomes che, and b, v, m, p, and f receive the letter L. This rule only applies to ya, so you have to watch out for this pattern. Let's use the verb govorit, which means to speak. A native Russian speaker would say говорить. Говорить. How would this verb be conjugated in the present tense in Russian? We take the infinitive говорить, drop the last letters, and then add the grammatical endings that correspond to the pronouns. For ya, we drop the ending and add you. So we get я говорю. Я говорю. For ty, we get ты говоришь. For on or оно, we get он говорит. For мы, we get мы говорим. For вы, we get вы говорите. For они, we get они говорят. Once again, there could be different verbs with different vowel endings in t, which may follow this pattern. This is the second conjugation pattern for simple verbs in Russian that end in it. Finally, to make sure that this concept is fully understood, I'll show 2 verbs, each having a different vowel ending that still follows the 2 conjugation patterns. Here, we have the verb гулять, which means to go for a walk or simply walk. Unlike the common endings that I showed previously, this verb has a vowel ending ya, which is гулять. Гулять. Despite having a different vowel ending, this verb has the same pattern as the first at ending. Я гуляю is I walk. Ты гуляешь is you walk. Он гуляет is he walks. Мы гуляем is we walk. Вы гуляете is y'all walk. And они гуляют is they walk. Still, there could be different verbs with different vowel endings, which may follow this pattern too. Next, we have the verb смотреть, which means to look or to watch. A native speaker would say смотреть. Смотреть. This verb has a vowel ending yet, which follows the same pattern as the second it ending. And let's not forget that this pattern is affected by the rule of stressed consonants, mainly in the ya and они pronouns. In this case, we don't have any. Я смотрю is I look. Ты смотришь is you look. Он смотрит is he looks. Мы смотрим is we look. Вы смотрите is y'all look, and ani смотрят is they look. Don't forget that there could be different verbs with different vowel endings which may follow this pattern too. But for now, this is all you have to know about verb conjugations in the present tense. In the next videos, I'll explain how other conjugations work and what to do with exceptions and irregular ones.